let's move to the next perspective here, which is the pedestrian perspective. You know, as a reminder, we're kind of balancing here safe and respectful use of the roads by motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians. And we're all pedestrians, and we're all I think all motorists as well. So just to reinforce that when you're walking and there is no sidewalk, against traffic and as far to the left as possible is the way in which you should walk. That way you're seeing oncoming cars and oncoming cars are seeing you. And the bottom question, I think, is relevant to cyclists here. Do cars and bikes have to stop for me when I walk in the street? So again, we're equal to cars with respect to the law. So when there is an official pedestrian crosswalk, both cars and bicycles are supposed to yield to the pedestrian in that crosswalk. Pedestrians who are crossing mid-block or not in an official crosswalk, they need to yield to the oncoming vehicles, and the vehicles have the right of way. So there's been a lot of increased signage to indicate pedestrian crosswalks, and that's why once a pedestrian enters that crosswalk, they have the right of way, and cars and bicycles need to yield. Now, I think in real life, bicycles will keep going and go around that person, but just to know that has to be yielding to them and not, you know, making them stop for you. Again, this is where being seen and using your eyes is allowing predictability. So the best way to know as a pedestrian that a motorist or a cyclist is actually following the law and yielding to you when you're in the crosswalk is to get eye contact with that person as they're approaching. And when you have it, that's more assurance than not that you're on the same page. So eye contact is really important. There's lots and lots, there's a big giant manual of vehicle and traffic laws in New York State. And when we dealt with the police departments in Piermont and South Nyack and Orangetown to highlight certain laws, the ones that we've talked about are the ones that came up. And we're going to continue to try to educate motorists and cyclists about these issues. But is there any other law or cycling situation that anyone wants to bring up that we can talk about as a group and how we approach them? Any other situations that come to mind for further discussion?
Paul, please, I would just add very briefly back to following on Steve Kroll, the idea of leaving a gap every 3 or 4 bike lengths for passing sounds good. The club has traditionally, historically, made it a point wherever there's a big number of cars backing up behind you, behind a group waiting to pass, as has happened through the years, particularly through Piermont and Nyack, the riders will pull over at a safe spot to let a bunch of cars go by.
Yeah.
And that's a nice way to engender not hate.
Yeah, and I think Rita's point is important on the sort of the political side of these questions. When that kind of behavior is not the way you know, a group of cyclists behaves, it gets the citizenry, you know, more against cyclists. And the Orangetown single file law really was a reaction to a, you know, small but loud public outcry against cyclists. And we want to change the attitudes of people all the way around. So follow the law, but even beyond the law, we're looking for the cyclists in our community to be courteous and respectful and, you know, truly share the road.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed a couple of years ago, I even took pictures of it in, I don't know, between Nyack and Piermont, there was a sign up on a pole that said single file 250 fine.
Mhm.
When I ride that same road, I don't see the signs at all. Were they taken down by the local municipalities? And because I was wondering, they had them up and everybody, you know, they would warn them, hey, look, if you guys do double, you're gonna get a fine. Now they're not there. So does anyone know, is that fine been removed or is it, like you say, 400, you know, what's the situation with that?
It's very much still the law in Orangetown. It's selectively enforced only because it's just not practical. And I think the police would say not completely necessary to be ironclad on enforcing it every time they see it. But yeah, it's still the law and still a fine. Dave, you may recall it's actually in Orangetown a kind of severe law. I don't remember the penalty, but it's still in place for sure.
Okay.
Yes, something like there's a fine the first time and the fine gets bigger and they can take away your bike. Also, all of these things also put points on your driver's license, which I always wondered, well, what happens if you don't have a driver's license? But those are all things that are on the books and behavior that they can exercise.
I should add one other thing that I'm seeing online, because I just checked really quickly. It's probably more important than $100 or 250, which is what the range is. It also says, according to what I'm looking at, and I can double check it later, or up to 5 days in jail.
Right. That law is set up to put you in jail. It's more severe than a motorist breaking traffic laws.
Yeah.
But as I said, it was a reaction politically and I think rarely enforced, but it is technically the law that's out there, and generally safe behavior in the right situations to ride single file anyway.
And actually I'm sorry to interrupt, but a second offense gets 250 to 300 or up to 10 to 20 days in jail. It also applies to roller inline skates, just so you know, it's not just discriminatory against bicyclists. Rollerbladers too.
I will say the membership in the Rockland Bicycling Club does not include bail for any infractions.
I have a question that wasn't really talked about, but I think it's important. I think bicyclists need to have both front and rear facing lights of some sort, even during daytime. And I was wondering, does the club have any guidance about this? And are there any laws about lights?
I don't know if there's laws about lights, but I know in my own best practice, I always have a blinking light, and I use red and blue. It seems to catch people's eyes, and I know that Steve Braille always uses a white blinking light in his front. I don't use that, but he does, and he feels it's very effective. And I think generally, most all of us have at least a rear-facing light operational. And you know now there's lights that connect up to your Garmin or your head unit that actually use radar to tell you who's behind you. And I know a couple of guys that have those. So I think the general best practice on the road is the people who are using them, but I don't think that there's a law about it.
Yes, state code requires front white light, rear red light from dusk to, I believe it's dawn, or they might use a different word for dawn. I forget what the code says. And with the lights that are available these days that are so visible in daylight, that's really a best practice, I think, to have daytime lights, you know, at all times, front and rear. But dusk to dawnish, it's required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that in New York City, when you cross the GW into Manhattan, you better have lights. I have a bell. I mean, these cops, I've seen it. They will target, they go by the book and they see you riding down Fifth Avenue, they'll pull you over. You don't have a light in your back, I'm writing you up. I've heard about it and I've seen it. So if you come in New York City, have your lights front and back. In terms of Jersey and Nyack, I don't see them stopping for that, but I definitely know once you hit Manhattan, you're a cash cow and they will stop you.
And I think that the light topic is a subset of best practice in terms of visibility in general. I mean, that's why bicycle jerseys are so bright and colorful. It's to get you always visible. Moving colors are more visible than static colors. I have the most outlandish orange cycling shoes, and they're better than the lights in terms of being visible. So again, best practice is be visible with your clothing, be visible with your lights. But again, I don't think it's the law, other than what Rita says, when you ride at night.
I would just mention, since my name was mentioned before, the rule is from half an hour after sunset
Yes,
till
half hour before
before
sunrise.
and in New York, you are required to have a bell. Most of us don't, but that's that. If you're like, I think it was Don said, if you're going into the city, they do ticket for not having a bell, and that's the requirement. And from my own point of view, when you look at the statistics on crashes, you're most likely to get hit by someone in front of you. The person in back of you is much less likely to hit you. So that's why I think the front light is the most important.